This is the presentation I will show at Leeds IEEC conference in early September 2018. It's about the Entrepreneurial University, and more specifically it's about the deliberate high-tension approach to the Entrepreneurial University. First, we have to ask ourselves, what does this word mean? Entrepreneurial. Anybody knows? Because there has been a lot of different terms where this word is being used. Entrepreneurial universities, of course, but also entrepreneurial education, entrepreneurial intentions, entrepreneurial mindsets, entrepreneurial passion, entrepreneurial learning, and so on. I would say that we have entrepreneurial confusion. So this presentation will contain 3 parts, and the main topic is of course this deliberate high-tension approach, which you will see in the 3rd section. But in order for us to get to that point, we have to first discuss what does entrepreneurial mean, and then I will present you with a model of being entrepreneurial, and we will take some examples from of this model, and then finally we get to a deliberate high-tension approach to the Entrepreneurial University. So first we have about 8 minutes theory, then we have about 12 minutes some examples from practice, and then we have 8 minutes for some implications for higher education institutions. That's about it. Let's get started. So, what does entrepreneurial mean? Here is entrepreneurship viewed through a definitional prism. So entrepreneurship can take many different perspectives. And we can talk about innovation, growth and diffusion, like Schumpeter did back in 1938. We can talk about entrepreneurship from the perspective of successful entrepreneurs. We can talk about entrepreneurship from the perspective of organization creation, or new value creation, or opportunity identification creation. We can talk about it from a learning perspective as a set of learned competencies. And we can talk about it from a methodological perspective as prescriptive entrepreneurial methods. But when we go from talking about entrepreneurship to entrepreneurial, I think we need to rule out the organization creation perspective. And I will now take the remaining perspectives that we have here and try to construct a model for what being entrepreneurial can be. So we start with learning and value for others, taken from the perspectives of entrepreneurship as a learned competence and the perspective of entrepreneurship as new value creation. Learning might not be so difficult to grasp, but what do we mean by value, and what do we mean by for others? What is value, and for whom, and why? Well, here you see a model of 10 different perspectives of value, 5 self-oriented perspectives and 5 others-oriented perspectives. The most common perspective in entrepreneurship is to view it as economic value creation for oneself, simply because entrepreneurs, when they are successful, they also become rich. But I think that is a misunderstanding. The most interesting aspect of entrepreneurship is actually that entrepreneurs create value for others. They create value for customers, they create value for society. The value that is then created for themselves, if they are successful, is, I would say, more of a byproduct. It's not the most interesting aspect from a societal point of view. So therefore in the model we have value for others. But what does it look like? What do we have when we have a lot of learning and not so much value creation? Well, we have education. Students seldom create value for others. And what do we have when we have a lot of value creation for others, but not so much learning? I would say we have the business sector. A lot of ongoing business, not changing so much. What I would like to see is a balance between learning and value creation. And when we have that, I would say that we have people being entrepreneurial. So let's go back to our model construction here. We have learning versus value for others on one axis. But then we have another axis with agency and novelty. I don't believe in the trait theory of successful entrepreneurs, but one thing we can say about them is that they do have agency. They have acted to create value for others. And we also see that the more novel the value they create, the more we tend to call them entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial. So innovation also has something to bring here to this model. And then we take entrepreneurial methods and we take opportunity focus. And I would say that when we go between learning and value for others, we are working in line with methods for opportunity creation, or entrepreneurial methods in general for how you create opportunity. And when somebody sees something novel, then I would say we have opportunity identification. The last step now is to connect the four concepts with each other everywhere you can. And that gives us a diamond and a cross in the middle. There are two axes. You have a professional axis, which is the 90% perspiration of being entrepreneurial. And then you have a personal axis, 10% inspirational of being entrepreneurial. And this more or less reflects what entrepreneurship is about. It's a lot of perspiration, going between learning and value for others, and some inspiration to it, agency meeting novelty. So this gives us a diamond with two axes. I will show you a video that summarizes this model once again. Here it comes. In the second part, I will give you some examples of how this diamond model works in practice. And since learning and value for others is such a big part of what being entrepreneurial is about, we will try to focus a little bit on that for a while. One problem with learning and value creation is that they are often difficult to mix. Learning is isolated from value creation, almost as if it was oil and water, as you can see here in a lava lamp. In education, we have traditional learning as the blue part here, and then we have bubbles, green bubbles of value creation, such as work experience programs, apprenticeships, vocational education, entrepreneurship programs. drama, pedagogy, and so on. And it's not much better in the business sector. Traditional business as usual is the blue part here, and the green bubbles here are instead projects, spin-outs, entrepreneurs, mergers and acquisition units, and so on. So, learning and value creation seem very difficult to mix. In my research, and the research we have conducted at Chalmers University of Technology, we have been looking specifically at what happens in these mixing points that you can see here in the middle. What happens in those very unusual environments where learning is being mixed with value creation. So we've been taking a very close look at these small bubbles that you can find here in this mixing point. I've been using a tool for data collection that builds on smartphones. It's an app called LoopMe, which you can look more on at loopme.io. We've been using this to collect data from people involved in activities where they get to learn and create value at the same time. So one of the environments we've been looking at is the entrepreneurship program where I work. It's the Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship. It's a master program, a 2-year master program. This we call this a venture creation program, and we've been doing quite a lot of research on this kind of program. It's defined as when you start a real life venture as formal part of your education. And at Chalmers, our venture creation program is very much integrated with our incubator and with the university technology transfer functions. And I will talk a little bit more about this later on. So here we have an example of an entrepreneurial university, being Chalmers, mixing learning with value creation in a very specific type of education. And we've been looking at what's going on there. So we call this a clinical lab because we are looking at our students while they are trying to create companies. So that is a bit clinical research, you could say. So we define a venture creation program as an in-curricular creation of a real-life venture as the main learning vessel for the students. And what's interesting here is that since we have a helping relationship to these people, the students or the entrepreneurs, the nascent entrepreneurs, and we also have a power to intervene, this can lead to very interesting data that we can collect, very revealing data that we get from these people that otherwise would not be possible to collect. And this is based on Kurt Levin's view that one cannot understand a human system without trying to change it. And I firmly believe in that statement as well. So we've been looking at these venture creation programs around the world. We have not found very many of them. This is what we found back in 2012 when we started this research. We found 3 programs in UK. We found 5 in the Nordic countries. We found a number of programs in the US and very little actually in Central Europe. So yeah, but we continue this research and we took the insights from venture creation programs and we started studying other aspects of education, and we call this value creation pedagogy or value creation as an educational philosophy, and we've been looking at this at primary and secondary schools, mainly in Sweden, but also in Norway and Turkey. And we use teacher training to develop schools so that they work more in line with this value creation pedagogy. And then we studied what happened to these kids. And we also had teachers in preschool testing these ideas out, and it worked really well. So this was the topic of my dissertation in 2016, value creation as educational practice. And I basically asked myself, are we going here towards a new educational philosophy grounded in entrepreneurship? ? Well, the future will have to tell. And so learning through creating value for others In my thesis, I define this as when you let students learn by using their current and future competencies to create something new of value to at least one person outside their own team, class, school, or university. And we use this idea to build a progression model of entrepreneurial education. And I define entrepreneurial education as both enterprise education and entrepreneurship education. So we have both the broad enterprise approach and the narrow entrepreneurship approach in this. And you could say that the first step is to work with creation activities with the students, followed by value creation activities with your students, followed by, and then we cross over from enterprise education into entrepreneurship education. We get into organization creation. And the last step, which venture creation programs represent, is when you work with sustainable organizational development. You actually intend to create a real-life company at an educational program. So, and we've been looking at the three most, perhaps most broadly applicable approaches here: creation, value creation, and organization creation. And we've been trying to compare these three main types of entrepreneurial education. And we've actually been seeing that there is a historical development here from the 1970s, which I would say is the first generation of entrepreneurial education, when everything was focusing on organization creation. High complexity, very narrow applicability. And then in the 1990s, and I call this the second generation of entrepreneurial education, we started talking about mindset development, increased graduate employability, and much lower complexity, much broader applicability. But the challenge with enterprise education, I would say, is the poor empirical data around effects. So this, I would say, is now triggering a third generation of entrepreneurial education, where we view entrepreneurship as new value creation. This brings us to medium complexity. Applicability is broad still, but not very broad. It's more narrow. And the purpose instead becomes to make students learn better. And we have emerging data suggesting that we have wide-ranging effects on student engagement, on learning of all kinds of subject matter. And I think this is a very promising time for entrepreneurial education that we are seeing now. So we have a number of resources that we have developed in this research around how to do value creation pedagogy. We have a checklist or a spider diagram for teachers, 8 factors that they need to consider when working in this way. The 2 most important ones are on the horizontal axis: interaction with the world outside class, school, or university, and value created outside team or teacher. We have also developed assessment support together with colleagues around Europe in EU project, and you can find the result of that at entreassess.com. It's a whole approach to assessing entrepreneurial education, which I think is absolutely crucial. We have also developed a number of different forms for teachers that they can use to try to pinpoint what is the value creation pedagogy assignment that they want to work with, and how can they develop an existing course to have more of value creation for others into it. And finally, we also have a progression model where you can see where are you in value creation pedagogy, where we look at in the first, second, and third steps on what kind of value is created, who are the recipients, what kind of feedback do you get, what's the magnitude, what's the time span, how is it planned, and what kind of IT support do you have around it. These tools were the result of studying value creation pedagogy at primary and secondary schools, but we have also taken this approach back to Chalmers to make all students more entrepreneurial at Chalmers University of Technology. I will show you a short video from that project. Here it comes.
At Chalmers, entrepreneurship is much more than just startup companies. Entrepreneurship by Chalmers is mainly about people using their knowledge to create new value for others. You may be studying physics, mechanical engineering, architecture, or mathematics. Everyone can develop an entrepreneurial mindset and create a more sustainable future. Chalmers is currently running a project aiming to provide all students with entrepreneurial experiences as part of their education. This means that during their education, students will apply their knowledge in real-life situations to create new value for others. We work with 3 entrepreneurial building blocks. The first building block is to create value for others. Through interaction with others, you gain an understanding of their needs, and based on these needs, create something of new value for them. The second building block is about ideas and opportunities, an iterative process involving idea generation, development and implementation so that new value is created for others. The third and last building block is about abilities and courage, ability to identify, combine and use own and others' resources. It's also about managing uncertainties and risks that often occur in entrepreneurial activities. These 3 entrepreneurial building blocks create a competence that will be valuable for students, researchers and partners in a variety of different contexts. Entrepreneurship by Chalmers.
Value creation pedagogy fundamentally leans on an altruistic paradox. What it's all about is that we get more motivated by creating value for others in 10 minutes than by creating value for ourselves in 10 years. So maybe it's better to ask our students, for whom is this knowledge valuable today, than to say to them, you will have use for this in your future life. We have also looked into a third area of mixing learning and value creation, and that is apprenticeship education and corporate entrepreneurship. So basically being entrepreneurial in corporations. I think it's a little bit too early to come with conclusions here today about that. I will have to come back on that. But the one reason we need to think about how to mix learning and value creation is because if we only have learning without value creation, we get unmotivated students that fail their education. And if we only have value creation without learning, we get organizations that don't renew themselves, but instead die. So there is much to win from trying to fix or find ways of doing this mix a little bit better. So what is it actually we are seeing here in this animation? Well, this is actually a Rayleigh-Taylor instability that you are watching now. It's from fluid dynamics. And what we can say about mixing learning and value creation is that instability is something that we absolutely can get, and that is absolutely a problem. One way to make sure that value creation and learning are mixed is to have mechanical mixing. As you can see here, this is a magnet mixing oil and water just to make sure that they stay mixed. But the problem is that as soon as you turn off the power, the oil will come back and separate itself from the water. Value creation will separate itself from learning. We could take inspiration from the area of cooking. Here we have Jamie Oliver mixing oil and water, or value creation and learning as we would say. And what we get when we do that is a béarnaise sauce, or a hollandaise sauce actually in this case. So here we have mixed oil and water on a chemical level. It's an emulsion. Do you know what makes the oil and water stick together in a hollandaise sauce? It's actually the egg yolk. So we have here a progression model around value creation and learning. In step 1, we have the who cares step, only learning or only value creation. And if we have learning with no value creation for others, we have a boring state. If we have a value creation with no learning, we have a dangerous state. And then we start mixing them. And I would call that the step 2, the beginner stage. And value creation is part of education, but it does not mix. Well, better than nothing. or learning is part of business, but it's kept separate. In step 3, we start mixing them quite a lot. But it becomes unstable and it could absolutely go out of control. But at least value creation and learning are mixed temporarily. But it's not a long-term viable strategy. And then in step 4, we have what I would call the expert phase. We have mechanical emulsion. We keep value creation and learning mixed at all times through constant stirring. It's exhausting and it's very energy intensive. With organizational terms, it costs a lot of money. So, is there a step 5? Or is it utopia? Can we find some chemical emulsion where value creation and learning are fully integrated on a molecular chemical level in a stable form, giving this very good taste that we are after here, and making it work long term? Is it possible? That's something that I'm looking at now. My current hypothesis is that we need to look for 10 sides, surface active substances that reduce the tension between learning and value creation. In oil and water, we talk about a hydrophilic side and a hydrophobic side. And my current hypothesis is that IT tools can be this 10 side. We are right now looking at how the IT tool LoopMe can act as some kind of a reduction of the tension between learning and value creation. And we are looking at an IT system facilitating an action reflection cycle, or reflection in action with Donald Schoen's word, where you start with a value creating act in the form of a mandatory task in LoopMe, and then you get a mandatory written reflection based on that completed task. So this is taking us into a lot of different areas. We have action-based education, but now we are also looking more and more into leadership, where developmental leadership has basically the same challenge, but from the other side of the surface between value creation and learning. And of course, LoopMe also becomes then a research and evaluation tool where we can see what is actually going on in this tension-intensive area where learning and value creation meet. You can have a look at LoopMe at this website, loopme.io. So finally we come to part 3, a deliberate high-tension approach to the entrepreneurial university. It all starts here in Entrepreneurial University 1.0. We have a value creation system consisting of commercialization structures. We have venture success as a key focus. We have technology transfer as a key activity. We have emphasis on practice, and we have faculty and staff working with this. And then we have a learning system. We have education where the focus is personal growth. Entrepreneurial education we find over here in the learning system. We have a theory emphasis, and we have students. What we have here is a silo structure. We have conflicting goals, we have many dichotomies, we have tension, we have contradictions, and we have two seemingly unrelated systems, a value creation system and a learning system. Let's merge these silos. Let's do a synthesis or a sublation, as Hegel would call it, value creation and learning, and try to span boundaries here in an interdisciplinary way, and deliberately introduce tension and turbulence into this. Then we get Entrepreneurial University 2.0, where we have a tandem learning and value creation system. Commercialization through education, venture success through personal growth, technology transfer through entrepreneurial education, and theory-informed practice, and also the other way around, practice informing theory. And then that will give us a situation where faculty and staff are helped and empowered by the students. But this is definitely a deliberate high-tension approach. And we will have cracks from this merger require constant care. Cracks between the value creation system and the learning system. So we will need different helps and components to address this, because there is a fundamental problem And it's even written in the Bible, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. What is the focus? Creating value or learning? Our research into this and our practical work into this at Chalmers has shown a number of different ways how we can build a system that keeps these cracks under control. We have venture creation programs. They are a boundary spanning component. They are absolutely crucial to get this system together. We also have value creation pedagogy that we are working now to implement across Chalmers. We can also see that a key component here is to look upon students as idea and knowledge movers. They become a strategic actor in the system in new ways. But then we also have to ask ourselves, what other 10 sides are there? What is the role of IT systems such as LoopMe in this kind of system? That is something that we don't yet know much about. So if we go back to the diamond model again of being entrepreneurial, what a VCP ultimately facilitates is university students teaming up with scholarly research or with corporate innovations or innovators' ideas in this dance, this entrepreneurial dance that creates entrepreneurial artifacts. The university can supply learning and value for others' activities. The students, they come with agency, and the researchers, they supply novelty. And then out comes entrepreneurial artifacts. So this leaves us with an action list with only 2 points. But we have been working on these 2 points for decades at Chalmers. The first point is to give all student learning activities a value creation component. Let students apply their knowledge and skills in teams to create value for others, in-curricularly. Make sure that in-curricular activities are connected to extracurricular networks. Make sure existing entrepreneurship programs are tightly integrated with your technology transfer system at the university. This is very tricky. And then the emphasis on value creation will be strengthened in the learning system. And on the second action point here is to give all value creation activities a student learning component. Make sure that all researchers that are, where it's relevant, are constantly courted by students who test their scholarly insights in practice. Make sure that idea evaluation processes take advantage of student labor time to accelerate the learning that is so crucial in those early stages of entrepreneurial processes. And when students create significant value, make sure that you regard them and reward them as crucial co-founders. And let students compensate their lack of knowledge and experience with energy, iteration, and time spent. So then entrepreneurship education becomes a crucial strategic asset through a VCP approach for Entrepreneurial University 2.0. And the emphasis on learning is strengthened in the value creation system. That's all. Thank you very much, and goodbye.